Ready? Feeling good? All right, cool. So what I want to do today with you guys is just kind of like we've been doing, is go over just some of the ins and outs of what programming is going to look like, why we're doing what we're doing, and then how to get the best response out of the people you're coaching, right? Because I think one of the big things with this stuff is we can write a program, but the reality is if we're programming for a group class, it's not going to be necessarily the right dose response for each individual in the class. So your job as coaches, right, if you're going to hold yourself to a higher order, and we're going to, is to basically be able to say, what is the point of this programming and how can I try to get the best dose response for each person in my class, whether or not they're going to necessarily do literally what's written on the board, right? It's not just a matter of being able to scale stuff, it's a matter of being able to say, how do I think about this? What is this going to feel like for each individual, and how can I sort of facilitate them getting a good experience out of it, right? So what I want to talk about today, we kind of went over a bunch of lactate stuff last time. I want to do something similar for kind of this concept of muscle endurance as well as CP battery. Because we have a lot of that stuff, and I've just sort of noticed in some of the classes that people aren't really getting it. They're not getting the right dose response from the programming, and it's not necessarily your fault as a coach, right? Because they don't necessarily get it, and they're sort of like, okay, well, I think this is what I need to do. And what I want you guys to be able to do is not just explain it, but also see what's going on and be like, you're doing what's written, but this is not the correct thing for you, right? It's sort of like the difference between following the letter of the law versus the spirit. So what I want to talk about to get started with is, what type of programming would we use to get into this sort of muscle endurance, CP battery type of stuff, and what does that feel like? Because if you're coaching, I mean, it's like marketing at some level where you're like, what is this other person thinking? What are they feeling? Why are they thinking it? Why are they feeling it? And how can I sort of say something that resonates with them to get the response that I want? So we think about CP battery. We've talked about this concept before. Any guys have some thoughts on what that looks like, what that means? Yeah.
Percentage being in terms of like your 1 rep max.
Repeatability of high percentage effort, right? So you can think of that as 1 rep max. You can think of that as total output with something like, sled dragging or pushing or airdyne sprinting or whatever. Basically, the idea here, it's sort of a repeated sprint concept, right? So we think about the CP system. We talk about this often. What is an example of something that would be, a test or training implement for the CP system? Give me a barbell example. Squat clean. Sure. Squat clean. Nicole, would you be training or testing your CP system by doing squat cleans at 35 pounds?
Would I be?
Yeah. Would a squat clean at 35 pounds for you elicit a CP response? No, it wouldn't at all, right? So what about a squat clean?
It has to be maybe like 80%.
Yeah, I mean, the actual percentage is maybe a little bit variable, but it has to be at least a quote-unquote high percentage of 1 RM, right? Depending on the context, there's different ways we can sort of look at that because you also have speed that goes into it and things like that, but if it's too light, it's not necessarily relevant. So any sort of barbell movement, squat clean, snatch, bench press, deadlift, provided it's at a relatively high enough percentage of 1 rep max or is being moved quickly enough, can elicit this type of response. What else?
Box jump.
Box jump. Sure. What about the box jump? What sort of qualifier do we need to put on that? What kind of AMRAP?
Like 3 to 5 minutes. Is that real?
Well, you tell me.
How many box jumps in?
3 to 5 minutes, maybe. AMRAP in 3 to 5 minutes, but what about it?
Higher,
Yeah, it has to be high. It has to be high.
tougher.
Tough, right? This is kind of the goal here. So if you imagine doing an AMRAP in 3 to 5 minutes, anyone who I have done programming for here has probably done 10 minutes of box jumps with the step down, right? That's sort of the standard prescribed weight, 24, 20 inches. That's not really much of a CP test, right? That's like, I'm out of breath and my quads hurt, right? Sort of more in that sort of muscle endurance aerobic component. But if we do, say, a 3 to 5 minute AMRAP of box jumps, this could definitely be testing the CP battery, but we would probably have to make them tough. So for someone like me, 3 to 5 minutes, box jumps at 40 inches, that's probably going to be some sort of CP battery type of situation, because I can do a box jump, it's pretty high, and then I probably need to stand there for a second and then do it again, come back, stand there for a second, right? I'm really not doing more than probably 1 rep, every like 6 to 15 seconds. Does that make sense to you guys? Cool. So box jump, what else could be a type of movement that we could use to elicit some sort of CP response, right? Either just pure CP response or CP battery. Airdyne sprint. Airdyne sprint. What qualifiers do we want on that? How long? Yeah, 10 seconds, sure. What happens if we go longer on that? What if we do an Airdyne sprint for 1 minute? It fucking sucks, right? It's horrible. Airdyne sprint for 1 minute feels awful, right? So with that lactate stuff we talked about last week, we do an Airdyne sprint for 1 minute, you taste blood, you're wheezing, you get a weird pump in your legs, you kind of come off and you're like, ugh, right? That's not necessarily going to be a CP response. CP response here, 10 seconds, really, really high turnover, right? You can sort of gun that thing as high as you want. You can use maybe the RPM to track how high you can get. And then before it starts to really suck, it's over. You can do it again. So this is kind of the idea in terms of stuff that we would utilize to start to test CP or CP battery. What would be an example of something, right? We sort of think about this time frame, up to like 10, 15 seconds. What would be something you could do, again, as hard as possible, 10 to 15 seconds, full effort, full nervous system engagement, maximum tension, and not even come close to tapping into that? Say it again? I would disagree with that. I think you can get there with a sled. I think you can definitely get there with a sled. What did you say, Gina?
I said power cleans, but I don't know if that's...
Why?
Well, I should say like a heavy-ish power clean, because it's tough to do more than, 3 or 5 reps.
Which means it's a good CP test.
Which means it's a good one.
Yeah.
Well,
What else? Yeah, I want a bad one. Rowing, maybe. So rowing, I think one of the issues with rowing and trying to get into like this sort of CP type of stuff is you can't turn it over fast enough, right? You're sort of, it's self-limited by how quickly you can accomplish strokes. So you can get way more power output if you're doing the Airdyne, if you're sprinting, if you're pushing a sled. And the rower ends up being limited by like, okay, it's kind of weird to get the fan going, and like I can really only get up to like 40 strokes per minute. I think rowing can do this, but I would agree that there may be better options than rowing. Pull-ups, well, it depends, right? So I'd say unweighted pull-ups, for most people who can do pull-ups, probably. Right? You probably can't actually get this type of response. You can definitely get it with a weighted pull-up, but I'm reasonably, adept at doing pull-ups. I could do as many pull-ups as I could do in 10 seconds and just like really try and crush it and full effort. And it's like, okay, I did 10. Like, whatever. Doesn't matter. That makes sense? What would be another example of something like that? Yeah, muscle up, maybe similar thing, right? So 10 seconds of max muscle ups for someone who can do them. I did 3. Great. So what? What about something like a double under? You do as many double unders as you can in 10 seconds. 15. oh my God, right? It doesn't matter. Does that make sense to you guys? Right, so you have to think about how hard can I actually push myself on this movement relative to the time frame. So if we're trying to get something that would be either a CP response or something that would be effective for training the CP battery, it has to be actually challenging enough for the time frame of 10 to 15 seconds to enable legitimate CNS engagement, right, and to actually tap into that CP system. If it's too easy, it's irrelevant. You guys kind of all see that? That all make sense to you guys? Cool. So we kind of have a framework for what we might be looking for in terms of starting to get a CP response in order to train the battery. So what do we mean by battery? You guys have any thoughts on what that means? Paul kind of said at the beginning, it's repeatability of a high percentage effort. So other than the CP system, which would be how strong are you, how fast are you, how high can you jump, how far can you throw your caber, Highland Games? What would be the other component to the CP battery? Because it's not just how much power you can create, how much strength you have, how fast you are. Yeah, how quickly can you recover? And what is involved in that? Yeah. Yeah, what do you have to do? Steroids? Sure, that probably helps. That probably helps a little bit, right? Bump up those hormone levels a little bit. Might be easier to recover if you got super physiological T, kind of. It's like No, in terms of energy systems, what's going to be the system that's going to help you recover between these high percentage efforts? Yeah, it's your aerobic system. All right, so the repeatability of high percentage effort is going to come down to a lot of factors. It's a black box. No one really knows necessarily what exactly is going on, right? But in general, especially based upon some of the literature relative to repeated sprint efforts within, field players for track and field, for rugby, for soccer, things like that, the ability for people to go really hard, recover, and go really hard again on sort of incomplete rest is going to come down to basically their oxidative capacity. How good is their aerobic system? Because what ends up happening is you tap out your CP system, and then for it to go again, you basically need to resynthesize the substrate within your body, right? It needs to make it again in order to get that response again. And the aerobic system actually is what does that. Does that make sense to you guys? So basically, we're looking at the CP battery, we're looking at sort of a unique physiological trait that comes down to how well can you resynthesize that substrate to do something challenging like this again? How well does your nervous system respond to doing something where it has to sort of be pretty highly engaged and then has to do it again? So it's not just about one effort, it's about doing it repeatedly. Cool? What questions do you guys have on that so far? So we sort of have an understanding of what types of things we would want to use to create this response. How would we train that? Excuse me on that. What would be a typical protocol you guys would see to train this type of response?
Complete rest.
Sure. Like what?
That's like what I just did today. It was like 10 minutes of 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. Max effort of something, right?
Well, I would disagree with that in the 30 seconds piece.
It'd be like 8 minutes,
Okay.
and wrap up as many power cleans
Sure. Yeah.
90% of your max.
Yeah. Sure. Exactly. Right. So Mike has a good one. So for Gina, right, what were you doing? Rowing?
I was doing wall balls and burpee box jumps.
Yeah. Wall ball, burpee, box jump. I would say that's not going to be this. Why? 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, a wall ball and burpee box jump.
It's never like that tired. Like,
If you're doing 30-30 on that, what do you have to do to get it so it's, sustainable? You have to pace it. You have to pace it, right? You're going to be limited probably more by muscle endurance and breathing. Are you going to have to stop during the 30 seconds you're doing it? No, right? Basically, the limiter on that is how quickly do I want to turn over these reps on the burpee box jump, and can my quads and my shoulders withstand doing another wall ball, right? It's not going to be like I did one and I have to stand back and kind of like shake it out and be like, okay, am I going to literally miss my next rep? You're not going to miss your next rep. You're never going to miss your next rep. I mean, like, I probably failed a wall ball once. because I just like weirdly didn't catch it. But like, there's no real opportunity for like failure. It's just like, this burns, this hurts, I can't really cycle it faster. Yeah, you failed some wall balls? But dude, you're like 4'9", so yeah. So if you're 4'9" and doing 30-pound wall balls, you might actually end up getting here somehow, right? Yeah. Yeah. But so I think Mike had a good example, right? And this is sort of a standard test for this type of capacity is 8-minute AMRAP power cleans at 90%. What does that feel like? Who's done that one before?
Yeah.
Mike's done that before. Britt's done that before. Paul's done that before. Failed 3 or 4 times. How many reps did you get? 18. Sure. 18 reps for Mike. Britt, what have you gotten on that?
27.
27 reps.
She must have not been going at 90%.
Well, so that's a good point, right? This is a really interesting point. So Emily said she must not be doing 90%, which kind of makes sense, right? It's sort of like, well, 90% is pretty heavy. Like 27 is kind of a lot to do at 90%. I would completely disagree, actually. For Britt, she can probably do more now.
Because of like my aerobic system, right? Like that.
Yeah, it's just kind of how you're built.
The few times I've done it, I've been in the mid-30s with them
Yeah, so that's wow. Dang.
recently.
Dang. Yeah, right? So what we're seeing here, in some cases, if someone is very new, has a very low training age, has low skill, has a shitty rack position, doesn't know how to power clean, right? Hits their knees on every rep, like maybe they're not actually getting this type of response based upon just skill acquisition. But for most people who have at least some training age, right, they've developed some strength, they roughly understand how to power clean, you're going to see massive amounts of variation in how many reps they can do at 90% in 8 minutes.
What would be, for the masses, I know the answer to this, but what would be at a high level, what would be good on that?
Define high level.
Well, take like a games athlete, like someone that is competitive.
Yeah, sure. So,
what would you, just so they can see that?
uh-huh. Yeah. Generally, females will perform better than males on this type of test. Just females have like lower neuromuscular efficiency and can generally do more reps at a higher percentage of a 1-rep max than males. Just kind of as a whole, that tends to be the case. For high-level CrossFitters, in terms of people who may have a shot at competing at the regional level individually, 30 plus minimum, right? 30 plus minimum. You'll see people though with a high 1-rep max. Right? So someone who will be able to power clean as a male, in fitness, 300 plus pounds, get over 40 reps on this, right? So it's not because they didn't hit a true max, it's because they're so fucking good at just being like, boom, resynthesize, boom, resynthesize, boom, resynthesize, which is why they beat everyone at everything.
Can you quickly touch on that idea of like a 1-rep max not being a true 1-rep max?
Yeah.
I think it becomes very difficult to explain to the average member as to why we might do it one way with fitness and another way with performance.
Yeah, sure. So the question is, what does it mean to say someone did not hit a true 1-rep max, right? So this is going to be dependent upon someone's training age at some level. So take someone who is new, right? They have never really done serious training before, right? Maybe they've joined the gym, they've worked with a personal trainer, they've like done cardio and like looked at some bullshit in magazines and like done some routines and things like that, right? But they've never really used barbells, they've never really gone heavy before, and it's their 3rd month of training. And say, okay, cool, we're gonna max out our power clean today. Would you say, why would that person maybe not hit a true 1 repetition maximum power clean relative to their potential? What would limit them? Right, technique. Right, so technique at some level is just like, I'm kind of nervous about this movement. Like, it's real weird. They want me to do this thing with my elbows. Like, I don't really know. And like, oh shit, knees, hips, knees, right? And it's just like, it's overthinking, technique isn't good, and they basically are just limited more by how well can I perform this movement, how well can I perform this movement without overthinking it than necessarily like their true maximum contractile potential in hip extension and how quickly they can drop under the bar. That's not necessarily the limiter. What else would be a potential limiter? Let's say we have the same person and honestly their technique is good, right? They move well, they do the movement well, they have good understanding of their rack position, they have good structure so they can extend the hip fully and drop under it. They're not super in their head. Maybe they don't feel 100% comfortable, but they're not just like checklisting themselves into, you know, weird, awkward oblivion. Why else might they not be able to hit what would be a true 1 rep maximum relative to their physical potential?
To go for my third wrong answer today, I would say
Third wrong answer, let's do it.
Between sets or attempts.
Rest between sets or attempts, sure. So this is an interesting one
Sure.
because, right, and I think Emily mentioned this earlier, you'll see people where we'll say, you know, bench press, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, rest 2 minutes between sets, and they're like, this is stupid, I don't need to rest, I'll just go again, right? So at some level, some of those people are probably not going heavy enough to actually challenge themselves. However, the reason that some of those people who are relatively new might only need to rest 60 seconds, 50 seconds between what is to them truly a heavy set before going again, what would that be? Because this is going to be relevant here. No, they are. They couldn't do more. Right? They did a you know, a true 5 rep max set of bench press, and then they rested 60 seconds and they did it again. And they're new. Why? You put 5 more pounds on the bar, they fail. They can't do it. But they can do their 5 rep max over and over and over again on short rest and just kind of be like, yeah, this is pretty tough today. They don't have the strength yet. That's kind of right, but why don't they have the strength yet? Why can't they do it? Yeah, training age. They don't have the training age to get true CNS recruitment of their muscle fibers to actually tap their physiological potential. Why do people get so much stronger linearly for months and months and months when they first start training? Yeah, right? It's not necessarily a pure technique thing. Their technique may be good. They're actually learning how to recruit more and more muscle fibers so they can move more weight, right? It's sort of they're eliminating nervous system inhibition of their movements, and they're getting stronger in this movement without necessarily adding more muscle mass. So a lot of people who are relatively new will not be able to get a true, you know, max relative to the contractile potential that their muscle has because they don't have the nervous system development to actually tap into it. Does that make sense? Right, so to kind of come back to where we were going, you get someone who might get a very, very high score on this 8-minute AMRAP of power cleans, who is new, not because they didn't go heavy enough, because if you had them do more weight on their 1 rep max, they would fail, right? Not because they have bad technique, because they actually move pretty well on it, but because they don't have good CNS recruitment in that movement. So for them, 90% relative to their maximum contractile potential is actually low, simply because they don't have training age. You guys kind of follow that? Does that make sense? Right? So hopefully that makes some more sense too with some of the stuff you see from people doing, you know, who are new, doing the fitness program and stuff like that, where, you know, they're like, why are we taking 2 minutes rest? I like need 45 seconds rest. This is too easy, right? And like to them it's right because they don't need 2 minutes rest because they can't get it. That makes sense to you guys? Cool. So back to this concept of CP battery. 8-man AMRAP power cleans at 90%, right? Good training, good testing. What's another type of protocol that would be good for creating this type of training situation? Well, I don't care about movements. We already talked about movements. I want what? So let's say today training A, back squat. Do it. B, clean pull. Also do it. Do this as well. C, we want to do some battery work. What are we going to do? Every minute, on the minute, right? Why is this so popular in CrossFit fitness training?
It's like easy to set up
It's easy to set up, and it trains the shit out of this. And this is a massive component of success in the sport of fitness. Every minute on the minute, right? What are you gonna do? You're gonna do something that's pretty hard for 10 to 15 seconds. You're gonna rest 45, 50 seconds, and you're gonna do it again, right? So basically you're training the ability to restore the CP system on quote unquote incomplete rest and be able to do it again, right? So if you do a bunch of on-the-minute training, you get better at restoring your CP system in between heavy sets. You can probably do more power cleans than 90% in 8 minutes. How do we want to set this up? Let's give some parameters here. I want this to be squatting. I want this to include upper push pull, and I want this to have 4 components. So we're going to do 4 different movements every minute on the minute for 20 minutes. We're basically doing 5 sets. What do you guys think?
Front squat.
Front squat, sure. We'll do front squat first. What are we going to do with it?
5 reps.
5 reps. 5 front squats. How are we going to prescribe this? This is where it gets tricky.
You want a number or percentage?
Well, that's the question. Do we want a number or do we want a percentage? So let's say we're making this for a group class environment, right? This is going to be the type of thing you guys are going to see in a group class. What's wrong with putting a number on that? Yeah, right, the number is going to be right for a theoretical avatar. So for me, we're doing 5 front squats on the minute for 20 minutes. My squat battery sucks. Personally, I'm terrible at that, right? I'm okay with like deadlifting and like power cleaning and stuff like that, but you make me do a bunch of heavy squats, it's really, really, really hard for me. My max front squat, I think is like 355, something like that. So for me to do this, honestly, it would have to be relatively low. I probably wouldn't be able to do much more than like 225 to 255 on the minute for something like that without just breaking down. Right, 5 reps is kind of a lot too, especially if you start to grind them, it can take a while. So for me, it would be something like, I'd probably say, honestly, I wouldn't do more than 235 for that if I was prescribing that for me. 235 divided by 350, what is that? It's like, yeah, 60-something%. So what would be a good way to prescribe this to a group? Right, so, and again, we're gonna have a lot of variation, people, because Britt, high training age, right? Actually relatively decent with squat battery. She can probably do like almost up to like 80% of this, right? And she's kind of an outlier relative to the norm here. Yeah, so I would probably say something like 60 to 75%, just if I was prescribing this to a group class. Because you also have to take into account that people are gonna be fucking idiots. And they're gonna be like, 60%, that's easy. I'm gonna do 80%, right? And like, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. Because they're like, I'm good. I'm tough. I want to do the hardest thing possible. And they're just gonna sort of misunderstand. So as coaches, you have to be able to sort of think about what is the goal of this? What is this person getting out of this? And talk people kind of off the, toughness edge in terms of what they're trying to do. But I prescribe it 60 to 75%, sure, right? And then explain to people maybe why they would want to err more on one end than the other. For me, terrible squat battery, kind of bad battery in general, faster than I am strong, some groin issues relative to squatting, my upper back turtles on front squats, like this sucks for me, this is gonna wreck me. So I'm gonna wanna be on the lower end of that, whereas someone with better structure with squatting, better limb length, right? Short legs, that helps a lot. Good rack position, good sort of CP battery in general, they're gonna wanna be more higher end. So 5 front squats, and for this you can take it from the rack, you can take it from the floor, whatever. What's up?
No, I was thinking of the next movement.
Okay, cool. Next movement. What do you think?
Handstand push-ups.
Handstand push-ups. Cool.
7.
So, any specifications for that handstand push-up? No specification. So, what becomes the issue here? So again, just saying, let's say that this is programmed for performance environment. The assumption is that most people are going to be able to at least do handstand push-ups, right? Obviously, for a group that can't do it, it's not going to work. But the assumption is that they can do it. What's up?
Unbroken.
Yeah, it's going to have to be unbroken. So in general, all this shit has to be unbroken. So if you guys are coaching this, the point of this isn't like, oh, I'm going to do 2 handstand push-ups and kick off the wall, do 3 handstand push-ups and kick off the wall, do 2 handstand push-ups, and then finish my set at 52 seconds, and then scurry over to my next thing. That's not the point of this, right? The point is like 10 to 15 seconds of relatively challenging work, rest. Because otherwise we're kind of in that fatigue-based state, and that's not what we're really trying to accomplish here. So 7 handstand push-ups, the assumption is that people can do it, right? In terms of cycle time, that's probably about right in terms of how long this is going to take people. What's the problem with this?
Technique and ability becomes a huge barrier.
Technique, sure, but let's just assume that people can do it. Let's assume that people can generally do it.
For some people, 7 is
So-
just going to be a walk in the park.
Yeah, exactly, right? I had Paige do 5 minutes of handstand push-ups. She got almost 100, right? So,
For me, I would struggle. I would struggle.
yeah, right? But think about that. So, how many total reps is this going to be over 20 minutes? We have 4 intervals. We have 20 minutes. It's 5 sets. 7 times 5 is 35. Paige can do 50 unbroken in 1 set. Who cares? Like, this is stupid for her. This is totally irrelevant. It doesn't even come close to creating this type of response. How do we fix that?
You have to make it tough for the
Yep. Yep. Deficit or not. Tough. Right? For me, depending on the situation, that might be about right for me. Right? I can do handstand push-ups. I'm not terribly good at them. 35 is probably not a total volume number that's right for me, probably more like 50 or something like that. But, for me, that's at least close. For some people, that's total bullshit. It's nothing. For other people, that's too hard. What do we do for people it's too hard? Yeah. Sure. Give them a rep range, 4 to 7. For some people, 4 is going to be about right. I would say that if you can do handstand push-ups, you should be able to get 20 done in a workout in general, or else you probably shouldn't be doing them in your workout. Does that make sense? So give them a rep range so you can at least have sort of like, okay, this is tough for you. Maybe you have to grind them a little bit, but maybe 20 reps is a good number for you relative to this workout. Give the option of a deficit. That enables someone who's really good to challenge themselves appropriately, right? We want to be able to find how do we get the right dose response for each person. And if we just have one prescription, then it's not necessarily going to be appropriate for everyone. What questions do you guys have on that? That makes sense? Cool.
Quick, so should we be allowing people to scale handstand push-ups?
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
Like an amount?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of, say someone can't do a handstand push-up, but they want to work on it, what would be a good option here? You can reduce the deficit, right? You can use an ab map. I'm okay with that. I mean, I think there's value in a lot of different options here, right? So you can use ab mats to reduce the deficit. You can have them do only the eccentric portion, right? You can have them do any other upper body pushing activity. Maybe they can do dips, and dips are an okay dose response for them. Maybe you can have them do vertical pressing, because we might want to keep this, so some sort of dumbbell press, dumbbell push press, something like that, right? So all that sort of like standard movement modification, scaling type of stuff, you can utilize in this type of situation too, right? Because there's going to be some people that shouldn't be doing overhead work, right? My shoulder impinges every time I go overhead, and I think I'm a badass, and I'm just going to ignore it and like kind of be like this every time. It's like, dude, don't do that. There's other stuff you can do, right? Maybe ring dips are fine for you. What other questions you guys got on that? Cool. Next movement, what do you think?
Strict chest and bar pull.
Sure. Strict chest to bar. What do we think in terms of a prescription here? 3 to 5. Yeah. I think that's about right. Because even someone who's real good, especially when you add the component of making something strict, even people who are pretty good at this, like 5 strict chest to bar is hard.
3, 4, 5 is nasty.
Yeah, that's hard for almost everyone, right? But let's say that there is someone who's just a total freak. Say Irving Hernandez is doing this. What might we do to make it more challenging for him? Yeah. Add weight as necessary. Cool. And again, that's going to be about right in terms of total time frame, right? You think about how long does this take to actually accomplish? Are you going to be able to do this unbroken? That's probably about right. And then let's add a cyclical piece here for the last one. What do you guys think? What is a good high turnover cyclical piece that you can do for 10 to 15 seconds that will get some form of CP response? Simple, Airdyne. Might as well. Airdyne, 10 seconds, all out. Now, in terms of prescribing this to someone, right, generally assume that everyone is an idiot and is going to do it wrong and not understand the point. What would we use to track that? Yeah, why wouldn't we use calories for this? Because we use calories for a lot of stuff. I mean, so regardless of the fact that every fucking Airdyne has some weird different monitor, and like if it breaks and you fix it and the chain changes, it suddenly counts differently, and there's like no consistency across Airdynes, let's pretend that there was. Why would calories not necessarily be the best way to do this?
Someone like Dan Brown is going to put out a shit ton more calories than me.
Yeah, so there's going to be differences between people, and I think that's okay. There's going to be differences between people in terms of how much weight you can use, whatever. But relative to themselves, what would potentially be a better metric for 10 seconds all out than calories? Yeah, RPM, right? Why? Why do you guys think that?
Because you can probably peak that RPM in the first 3 seconds, but then drop it throughout the rest rather than just going as high as you need to.
Yeah, so I would say that for something like this with 10 seconds, you're sort of thinking about like what's my signal to noise. You can probably get a much clearer signal for 10 seconds of work utilizing something like RPM or watts, because you're going to see that curve, right? So your RPM is going to kind of go up. Over 10 seconds, you might be able to get to really peak, and it might start to tail off at the end, depending on where you are in your sets, right? So you're going to have a much clearer picture of what your 10 seconds of work actually looks like using something like RPM or watts. You know, it's not going to be perfect. Like, you know, you're going at first and you're like, oh, it's only 70. My last set was 110. And then, like, by the end, it starts to speed up, right? It's not necessarily perfect, but it's much more, you get a lot more information out of it. And, like, with the calories, especially, like, you finish and then the bike kind of keeps spinning and, like, you don't know when it actually turns over. And you're like, oh, like, I got 3 extra calories after I'm done, but I don't know when I got that relative to the first time. So usually that's a better metric in terms of making sure that your power output stays high. What could go wrong doing this? What problems will occur? Think about someone just missing the point, doing stuff wrong, falling apart, making it too easy. How are people going to make these mistakes? What mistakes are going to be made?
For every movement.
For anything, just in general, right? Like, say you're coaching someone, you're either coaching a group class that's performing something similar to this, or you're writing a program for an individual and they're doing something like this, and you're just like, God damn it, like, come on. Why are you thinking that? Why are you thinking, God damn it?
They're pacing it.
Pacing it, sure. So at some level, you may have to pace this a little bit, right? Just in terms of knowing your own capacity relative to these movements, right? It might not be wise to go 100% all out on everything in terms of cycle time, you know, weight use, stuff like that. But what do you mean by pacing it? Because I think I agree with you, at least partially.
I mean, if they're going like 60% on their front squats and they're going like 1 every 5 seconds.
Yeah, so basically if someone is not doing something hard enough, right, either in terms of their own relative effort, so particularly on this Airdyne, right, they're just not really going hard enough, or they're not selecting something that's challenging enough for them on each of these movements, right? So the goal for this is this has to be hard, right? It's not necessarily maximal. In some cases it is, but a lot of times if we hit something truly maximal, it's not going to be repeatable. So we still want repeatability, but we want it to be hard. So the goal, if we think about effort, right, is we want to find, like, I don't know, let's make a linear graph of effort. This is effort, a one-dimensional graph. Great. This is 0, and this is 100. We probably want people here, So probably something like 80 to 90%. This is great. Right? So if someone is not experiencing something that they would consider to be an 8 or a 9 out of 10 on each of these pieces, it's probably not hard enough for them. However, small caveat to that, what about over the course of 20 minutes? What's going to happen as you go? It's going to get harder. It's going to get harder. So again, this is something about sort of knowing yourself, knowing your body, knowing your athletes, whatever. On something like this, it might be okay for the first one to be a 7 or a 6, right? That might be okay depending on the person. It might be okay for them to be hanging out 7 or 6, and then after 2 of these, they're like, ooh, this is tough now. That's fine.
So, what the kind of metric I always use for people in a class is ask them, do they need to go heavier, harder, or faster? Heavier in terms of weight, harder in terms of technical difficulty, and then faster in terms of turnover, which I think everybody here is capable of visually seeing if someone is doing one of those 3 things. For me, that's in terms of the CP battery work, it's usually a good checklist. Heavier, harder, or faster. For most people. Comes in.
Sure. So, pitfalls. We want correct effort. We probably want, let's just say, between a 7 and 10, or sorry, 7 and 9 out of 10 RPE, right? Rate of perceived exertion. What's so funny about that? What are you guys laughing at me for? You guys are bullies. It's messed up. So 7 or 9 out of 10. And then, like Paul said, heavier, harder, or faster. What else can go wrong? What else? You're going to see it and you go, no. Someone goes too hard. Too hard. Too hard. What happens then? What does that look like? Yeah, you just lose it. You just lose it. Right? Like it's like, say I'm doing my Airdyne and I hit, 118 RPM on my first one and I'm down to 85 RPM on set 3 and I'm yelling and moaning and hooting and hollering, right? So it was too hard for me. What would we do in that situation? How would you fix that? So slow down potentially, although with this dose response, that's not necessarily what we want.
Increase rest.
Yeah, right, increase rest, because what's the issue? They basically can't resynthesize quickly enough to get the appropriate thing. So especially for someone who may not have done something like this before, who is a good athlete, right? They have a good training age, they have some experience pushing themselves, they have some barbell strength, stuff like that. They may not have experience kind of repeating efforts, so they probably just need more rest to actually resynthesize, to give their nervous system a break and hit it again. So too hard, it's probably going to be more rest. I think it's going to be the best way to actually fix that, right? So what's the issue with that? Especially in a class environment. Yeah, everyone's going on the minute. Everyone's going, but everyone else is, ugh. What do you guys say to that?
Maybe make it 5 seconds then.
Sure, yeah, sure. More rest, decreased work. So, the Airdyne, 10 seconds is crushing him. Cool, do 6, right? What else could you do? But everyone else. No, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care what everyone else is doing. For you, you're going to do it every 90 seconds. You're going to do one less set. But I don't care. Do it. Right? Like, you guys have the authority to do that. Like, who cares what everyone else is doing? Doesn't matter. Right? And obviously use your intuition. Like, don't like rain on someone's parade and like humiliate them and like ostracize them and be like, no, you're going to do your own workout in front of everyone. They're all going to stop and look at you and shame you. So you're going on 90 seconds and they're resting. And they're going to be like, ha, 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 ha. You have to rest more. you have to, no, like it doesn't, right? Like, but honestly, people might legitimately believe that something like that's going to happen. And if that's the case, right? Yeah, explain why. You know, work with them in terms of like their own psyche relative to what they feel comfortable with. But, you know, you don't have to cater to everyone's like whim of wanting to do what the class is doing or what everyone else is doing. You want to get them the right thing. Cool? What else can go wrong here? There's one other little one that we already talked about, and I'll just say it, right? This stuff needs to be unbroken. And it needs to be done quickly. So like you don't want people going much over like 20 seconds on this stuff, right? If it starts to get hard for someone, it's taking a little longer as they go on, that's fine. But you know, if someone's finishing their work in 40 seconds, like that's not the point of this. Right? That means that they've kind of lost it. They're in a fatigue-based setting. It was too hard for them. They need either decreased work or more rest, or they just sort of selected the wrong number of reps or something like that for them. Does that make sense to you guys? Cool. What time is it? Cool. I think we're about, yeah, cool. I think we can probably wrap-ish. There's obviously many more ways that we can start to train this. So let's just throw a few up quickly. We won't go into as much detail, but just so you guys understand that this is an easy way to do it. It's a common way to do it. It works well in a class-based setting because you kind of have stations and you can be like, 3, 2, 1, rotate, right? And there's not just like people on top of each other. However, what would be another example of something that you could use to get this type of stimulus from someone? I think we're going to have something like this at least in part of the next training cycle. That might look more like CrossFit.
Like a number of reps for time.
Yeah, sure. So let's say we want to do something like this that looks like CrossFit. It's like you guys are going to do this workout as fast as possible. You're going to do it for time. Do it for time. For time.
Chipper.
For time. It's a chipper. Oh my God.
So many reps.
Ah. Right? What do you guys think would be a good way to train the CP battery with a chipper for time? Have you guys ever done the Filthy 50?
Yeah.
Is that a good test of the CP battery? Absolutely not. Why?
Too many reps.
Reps, low weight.
A lot of reps, low weight. What does the Filthy 50 feel like? It feels bad. It feels very, very bad. Your quads hurt, your shoulders hurt, you taste blood, you spend a lot of time doing this, you lay on the ground and roll around after it, right? You're not going to get that type of response from this type of thing, right? Because you're limited by something. So we want to set up a chipper that has some sort of limiting factor. How would we do that? Yeah, it has heavy. Sure, heavy. Heavy.
Heavy clean and jerks.
Sure, right? So if we have something that's heavy enough, then that's going to create this type of response that we've been looking for. So, heavy clean and jerk? Sure, heavy clean and jerk. So,
10.
clean and jerk. Let's do 10 of them. And then, what weight do we want on that?
70 to 85%.
I mean, that's going to take forever for people. So I'd probably go a little lighter for something like this. So let's say, 55 to 65% clean and jerk. So that's pretty heavy. Those are probably singles, right? Maybe you could do those 10 unbroken, but what's coming next? More shit. You're not going to do that. What's next? It doesn't have to. Now, keep in mind here, if we're doing this chipper, it doesn't necessarily have to be, everything like this, because we're going to come to another concept. So give me a more like CrossFit-y thing. Wall ball. How many? Is it? 15? That's too few. I want more than that. I want 30. 30 wall balls. 20 and 14 standard, right? You can do that unbroken, takes a minute. Will make you out of breath, make your shoulders burn a little bit. Again, we're assuming for someone who's relatively good, right? They're not necessarily a high-level athlete, but they're relatively capable. They could do that unbroken. They might choose to do it in like 2 or 3 sets. What next? I want another CrossFit exercise. 50 kettlebell swings. Let's stick with 30s. We're gonna make this elegant. We're gonna make this elegant looking. 10 kettlebell swings. 55. 35, again, that's kind of moderate load, right? You could probably do that unbroken. You might choose not to. Now I want another roadblock, and I want 10 of them. Sure. What is this 10 muscle ups going to do to your pace on the 30 wall balls and 30 kettlebell swings? Provided you are a relatively capable fitness athlete. It's going to increase it? You're going to go faster? Yeah, you're going to go way slower. You're going to go way, way, way slower, right? I can do 30 wall balls and 30 kettlebell swings unbroken, no problem. I'm going to feel moderately bad after doing that. If I have 10 muscle ups, I don't want to do these as singles, right? If I'm doing this workout, I want to get to my 10 muscle ups and maybe do like 6 and 4, right? 4, 3, 3. And I want to get through those relatively quickly. So what am I going to do here? I'm going to slow the fuck down. Yeah. I'm going to do 20-10, 20-10, right? And that's going to prevent me from kind of going deep down the rabbit hole and feeling absolutely terrible. And then when I get to the muscle ups, I'm going to be kind of like breathing heavy, but I can do 6 and I can drop down and breathe heavy for a second and I can do 4. If I do 10 clean and jerks, 30-30, I'm going to get to the muscle ups and I'm going to spend a lot of time doing this. So inherently this forces me to pace what I'm doing. All right, I want another CrossFit exercise that we can do 30 of that's going to suck. That's bad. I don't want to do burpees here.
30 box jumps.
Yeah, box jump. The 30 burpees, like even if you pace the burpees, it's going to fuck you up. Right? And I don't want people getting messed up on this. 30 box jump, step down, 24-20, and I want 30 of something else. Thruster. We honestly could do thruster. What's up? Could do deadlift. Just relative to what I'm thinking right now, I'm gonna say air-on calories. I guess kind of what I want to think here is like each of these is gonna take about 1 minute. It's 30 reps, so it looks nice, right? None of these things are gonna really screw you up, whereas like 30 burpees or 30 thrusters at kind of like a moderate load, even if you try to pace it, if you're not, like a games level athlete, is gonna probably screw you up a little bit. So I want these to be a little bit more aerobic. So that's just relative to my sort of thought process and bias. I do that. I want 10 more things. 10 things. Well, it'll be another good roadblock-ish type of thing. Wall climb. Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. Right, so same thing. 30 box jumps, step down, 30 airdyne calories, right? If you gun it on the box jumps, you can do 30 of those in a minute. If you gun it on the airdyne, you can do 30 of those in a minute if you're, relatively powerful. Obviously slower for females. But again, if I do 30-30 as fast as I can, my wall climbs are going to be a disaster. So I'm going to pace this a little bit. These 30 box jumps are going to take me 90 seconds. Right? I'm going to do 20 a minute or so. The 30 airdyne calories are going to take me a minute and 20 seconds rather than a minute. And I'm going to be able to move through my wall climbs and I'm going to finish. So what happens here with these roadblocks? Yeah, you have to pace it. And what does that make this workout look like? How much does this suck? It's hard. It's hard. How likely are you to puke from this workout?
200% chance.
Extremely unlikely. You are not going to puke from this. Why not?
Me or everybody?
Yeah.
I don't know. You can't like sprint.
Yeah, you can't sprint, right? These inherently slow you down. You're not going to be able to make yourself puke from muscle ups or wall climbs or heavyish clean and jerks. You could potentially make yourself puke from wall balls, kettlebell swings, box jumps and airdyne calories, but why are you not going to do it? Because you know what's coming next, right? So this is going to be aerobic and alactic, right? I mean, certainly if you take someone's blood lactate level, it's going to go up from something like this, but you're not going to puke, you're not going to get Fran cough, right? You're not going to roll around for 25 minutes, right? You're just going to have to pace it. So you're going to be moving aerobically through some of this stuff. Then you're going to hit a roadblock, and you're going to have to grind through it. Does that make sense to you guys? So we could keep going with things like that, but I want you guys to understand what is the thought process, what is the mindset in creating this type of workout. Then how do you make sure the people doing it are getting the correct dose response, right? Because it's one thing to write this. It's another thing to say, I want you, Gina, to get this response. Right? So you have to understand what are the pitfalls, how would I modify this appropriately for someone who maybe can't do a muscle up, right? Or whose shoulder impinges every time they go overhead. What is the point of creating something like this? What questions do you guys have on that? Nothing? Cool. All right, let's call it a day. Thanks, guys.